Yesterday's blues, yeah. Turn the TV off, this bad news, man.
Welcome to The Sports Show. Good morning and welcome to The Sports Show here on Lake Effect Radio and streaming live at lakeeffectradio.org/studio. I'm your host, Ryan Kirby. We have a great show for you guys this morning. We'll be talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes as they beat Michigan State on Saturday. And also we'll be talking about those victorious Cleveland Browns. But first, before we start talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes, I want to let everybody who is listening, either in Breakers or at home, know that you can join the conversation by tweeting at me at Ryan_Kirby19. That is Ryan with a capital R _Kirby with a capital K 19 on Twitter. Now I want to talk about those Ohio State Buckeyes as they beat Michigan State 26-6. Dwayne Haskins went 24 of 39 for 227 yards and a touchdown. Mike Weber led the team in rushing with 22 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. Ohio State will be playing at Maryland next Saturday at noon. Now, when you look at Ohio State, you see, they beat Michigan State. They just demolished them. But, you see these other games, you see the Mississippi State, Alabama game. That game wasn't, it wasn't really all that close if you think about it, 24-0. And then you also look at, Michigan beating Rutgers 42-7. You look at some of these games that Ohio State really was watching, Penn State beating Wisconsin. Those games, you look at the Ohio State miss especially, there's going to be that question of should Ohio State be, they're in the AP poll, they're up to number 9. They only dropped a spot. But once the college football playoff rankings come out, tomorrow night, there may be a switch at, the top 10. Will Ohio State be up at number 7 or 8, come tomorrow night? Because, if you think about it, they beat a Michigan State team that is pretty good if you think about it. They've got a great passing game, great running game. But in my opinion, for Ohio State, their special teams was flawless. Pinning Michigan State at the 1-yard line on almost every punt. You think about how, the whole team played very well. Dwayne Haskins played very well. The running game was very good. And then the special teams and defense were very good. The defense only giving up 6 points in the entire game. That's a pretty good game if you think about it. But, you look at how good Haskins has been, and, he's had his struggles, but for him to, pass for 227 yards and throw 1 touchdown, you see that, and you see, his progression, and, game after game, he just keeps getting better and better. They're going to be at Maryland next week, but I feel like the biggest test for him is going to be when they are at home against Michigan, in the rivalry game. But, if they keep winning, I could very easily see them getting to the, we already know one team that is in the Big Ten championship game, and that is Northwestern. They clinched on Saturday night, beating Iowa 14-10. So it'll be the winner of the East. So in my opinion, and everybody's been saying this that I've talked to, the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game will play Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. So if Ohio State can keep winning and come into the Michigan game at 11-1, I could see Ohio State, if they can beat Michigan, getting into the Big Ten championship game. Because I can't see Michigan getting into the Big Ten championship game, only because you look at the one loss that Michigan has. Their one loss is to Notre Dame, the first game of the season. You look at Ohio State's only loss of the season. That was to Purdue. There's that thinking of, wait a minute. Michigan lost to Notre Dame in the first game of the season. That was the week 1. Ohio State didn't lose until, what was it? It was I think a couple weeks ago. It was week 7. They lost week 7. That was their first loss. So when you look at that, I mean, when you look at Michigan overall in the conference, they're 7-0 in the conference. If Ohio State can beat Michigan at home, I could see Ohio State having to face Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game, because you look at Ohio State's upcoming schedule. They're at Maryland, and then they're at home against Michigan on November 24th. So, I mean, I feel like that game will be the biggest test for Ohio State. Is can they win this game, and then if they can win the Big Ten East, can they win the Big Ten championship? Because ultimately, if the Ohio State can win the Big Ten title, they should be considered for a playoff spot for sure. Because you look at the playoff standings right now, the only Big Ten team in there is Michigan at number 4. So Ohio State can beat Michigan. I could see Ohio State getting in as a number 4. I mean, look what they did in 2016. Being the 4 seed, beating Alabama, beating Oregon. I mean, those are 2 very tough teams at the time. I mean, Alabama's still a great football team. I mean, they're still going strong. But I mean, if you think about 2016, Ohio State was the 4 seed. They knocked off number 1 Alabama, and then they knocked off, number 2 or 3 Oregon. I mean, that's a Cinderella story in and of itself. So I mean, if Ohio State can, as I said before, if Ohio State can keep winning and they can beat Michigan on the 24th of November, I could see them in the Big Ten championship game, and I can also see them getting into the playoff if they can beat Michigan, and if they have to face Northwestern, if they can beat Northwestern as well. But I mean, overall, I mean that there's going to be a lot of discussions, once the college football playoff rankings come out tomorrow night. So that'll be the biggest test, to see where Ohio State is, what the committee thinks, given that they beat Michigan State, 26-6, and given that Penn State beat Wisconsin. Tennessee beat Kentucky, and I mean it should be an interesting night to see where Ohio State lands in the college football playoff rankings. Now I want to talk about those Cleveland Browns as they beat the Atlanta Falcons 28-16. Baker Mayfield went 17 of 20 for 216 yards, 3 touchdowns. Baker in the first half went 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns. One of those 2 touchdowns was a first quarter touchdown. And that's never happened. I don't think that's happened this year. So that's a big accomplishment for him. Nick Chubb added 20 carries for 176 yards and a touchdown. And that one touchdown was the longest rushing touchdown in Cleveland Browns history. So some history being made in Cleveland as well. And then Duke Johnson and Rashad Higgins each had a touchdown catch. I was actually at the game. I had the privilege of going to the game, and to be honest with you, the Browns looked like a completely different team yesterday. I mean, from the kickoff on, I mean, they played a very, very, very good game. I mean, they only had one mistake, and that was an interception thrown by Dontrell Hilliard on a trick play. I mean, that was the only mistake and the only interception thrown in the game for the Browns. So I feel like that's a huge, huge plus for them, not, only throwing one interception. But, I mean, and the stadium, when I was there, the stadium was actually half full. I mean, the lower bowl was filled. Part of the second level was filled. The upper deck was somewhat, a little bit full. But, to see how Cleveland Browns fans came out and just, I mean, the stadium was vibrating, and it was a great atmosphere. For Atlanta to come in, I mean, they are not used to playing in cold weather games. So for them to come in and it was just 40 degrees, but I mean, for them, that's like 20 degrees to them because their stadium's indoors. So they never play, they never get that experience of playing in, cold weather games. So when you look at that, I mean, you look at how good the Browns played. I mean, Baker Mayfield. I mean, is this the guy that we saw last week? Or is this a completely different guy? Because to be honest with you, this looks like a completely different guy, Going 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. And then overall going 17 of 20 for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. Where has this been where has this been the whole year? I mean, you see that and you're thinking, well, I mean, I bet you everybody's going to be saying, oh, he's an MVP candidate. Give him the MVP. In my opinion, it's one game. It's only one game. And to be honest with you, he looks more like an NFL veteran than a rookie. Because you see how well he played yesterday. I mean, he threw on the run. He made good decisions. I mean, he hardly got sacked. The offensive line was blocking for him most of the game. I mean, the running game was flawless. I mean, it looked like a completely, I'm going to say this again, it looked like a completely different Cleveland Browns team than we saw last week. And I feel like this is mostly because of the coaching. I feel like having Greg Williams as the head coach, he brings that, that fire to the team, he lights that fire, and he has that emotion and that passion for the game, and he must have said something to them before the game and at halftime, because they didn't look like the Browns we saw last week. Not at all. And I mean, you look at how, they hardly had any penalties. I mean, they had, 2 or 3 penalties, if that. I mean, they were playing the best football they've ever played, in my opinion. I mean, I'm going to go back to this. Baker Mayfield went 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. And he had a first quarter touchdown to Rashad Higgins. A first quarter touchdown. We haven't seen that in the past couple of games. I don't think we've seen that all year. We have not seen a first quarter touchdown this whole year. And to see it yesterday against a playoff contender like the Atlanta Falcons, a great football team. I mean, to score 28 points on a playoff contender, for the Cleveland Browns, that's a huge, huge boost for them. And they hung in the game. I mean, they played the full, 60 minutes. They didn't play, 3 quarters of the game, and then they didn't do that. They played the full game, and they won. So think if, next week they're on a bye, but the following week they're at Cincinnati. If they can keep playing this way, they're going to be a dangerous team. I know they're probably not going to make the playoffs. I mean, unless Cincinnati or Pittsburgh can, start to, choke a little bit. But, I mean, you look at, the Browns are 3-6-1 on the year? I mean, yeah, 3-6-1. That's okay. I mean, look at Pittsburgh. They're 6-2-1. If Pittsburgh can lose a couple of games and the Browns can keep winning, I mean, and right now in the AFC North, the only 2 teams with a tie are the Browns and the Steelers. So there's going to be that question of, are the Browns going to be is that going to be like a wild card game in the AFC? Will that be one of the wild card games in the AFC come playoff time? Because, the Browns will be at Cincinnati, not this coming week, but the following week, because they'll be on a bye, and then they'll be at Cincinnati the following week. And you look at what happened to Cincinnati yesterday, losing 51-14, losing to the Saints 51-14. I mean, the Bengals are very vulnerable to losing. Because you see how they lost to the Saints. I mean, 51-14, and the Browns beat the Falcons 28-16. In my opinion, I feel like the Browns sent their losing habits to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati sent their winning ways to Cleveland. It seemed that way. I mean, when I was watching, because I watched a little bit of the Bengals game during halftime, the Bengals, they looked like the Cleveland Browns of old, choking in the fourth quarter, not playing the full 60-minute game. I mean, making mental mistakes. I mean, the list just goes on and on. But then you look at the Browns. I mean, with Nick Chubb, the longest rushing touchdown in Browns history. It was a 92-yard rushing touchdown, the longest in Browns history. The previous record was a 90-yard run by Hall of Famer Bobby Mitchell on November 15th, 1959. Man, how long? Man, that record that's a long record. And then for it to be snapped by rookie Nick Chubb. I know for one thing, I'm never gonna forget that day, for sure. But to be there to witness that, to witness Baker Mayfield playing his best football I think I've ever seen in the NFL, man. But as the saying goes, you take it one game at a time, and hopefully the Browns can, having the bye next week and then going to Cincinnati the following week. I mean, a switch had been flipped yesterday. You look at Baker Mayfield, I mean, how well he played. I mean, I'm going to go back to this. 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, if someone looks at that numbers, they're like, that someone made that up. But then you look at it and you're like, yeah, he actually went 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. In my opinion, if Baker can do that every game starting now, the Browns are going to win the rest of their games, because they'll be, let's see, after the bye, they'll be at Cincinnati, at Houston, at home against Carolina, at Denver, and then at home against Cincinnati, and then at Baltimore to finish out the year. And those are all winnable games. I think the 3 winnable games, in my opinion, are the 2 Cincinnati games, both at Cincinnati and then at home. The game against Denver, that's a winnable game. And then the game at Baltimore, that's definitely a winnable game for the Cleveland Browns. But, I mean, if the Browns want to keep winning games like this, they need to do what they did yesterday. Catch fire in the first half and just... They need to... Because, in my opinion, since Atlanta did not have any momentum at all throughout the game. They didn't. And those 4th down stops that the Browns had when Atlanta went for it were very, very, very key stops for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I don't think I saw Julio Jones break out. I mean, I think he only had 1 touchdown catch in the game. That's it. And if the Browns can hold guys like him to 1 touchdown in a game, the Browns are more likely to win games if they can hold star players to 1 touchdown. I mean, they flustered Matt Ryan. The Atlanta running game was, it had its moments. But the Browns defense they came out and they were playing like a playoff contender. I know it's there's still some time, but the Browns could be a potential playoff contender either this year, maybe this year, and probably next year. I mean, I'm going to go back to this. You look at how good Baker Mayfield played. I mean, going 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, that's perfection. That's perfection at its finest. And then you see, Nick Chubb, run 92 yards for a touchdown. I mean, that's Cleveland Browns football. That's good Cleveland Browns football. To be honest, that's a playoff contender right there. The Browns are a playoff contender. After beating Atlanta, they're a legitimate playoff contender. Because you look at Atlanta, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. I mean, you look at their lineup is just so good. And for them to hold Julio Jones to 1 touchdown and to have the Browns stop the Falcons on 3 or 4 4th down plays. I mean, who would have thought the Browns could beat the Falcons? To be honest with you, going into this, looking at this game and looking at this matchup, I was thinking, okay, Atlanta's going to just wipe away the Browns. But to see the Browns beat the Falcons 28-16 my mind was blown at that point. I mean, and also to be there to see that, I mean, you look at how good, Rashard Higgins played, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, those guys, and then the defense to back up the offense and just to, put Matt Ryan, he was out of sorts most of the game. I mean, he hardly got any passes off. I mean, he got a couple completions, but, I mean, if the Browns could do what they did to Atlanta the rest of the year, I'm going to say this again. They have a legitimate shot of either getting to the playoffs this year or next year. Because they have that one tie against Pittsburgh where that could, put them in the conversation for a wild card spot. Because they have that one tie. So there could be that chance of us seeing the Steelers and Browns in a wild card game come playoff time. So, if the Browns can keep, I'm going to say this again. If the Browns can keep playing the way they played yesterday, they're going to be a dangerous, dangerous team. If they can get if they can get a wild card spot, they are going to be a dangerous team. Because, they scored, I'm going to say this again, they scored a touchdown in the first quarter. In the first quarter. They haven't done that in the past couple of games. Actually, they haven't done it all year. But, when you see that and you see them scored against Atlanta and beating Atlanta, Atlanta doesn't have a good, they're 1-3 on the road and 4-5 overall. That's a pretty good football team if you ask me. Atlanta's a very, very, very good football team, and the Browns just beat a very good football team. But then you look at the game coming out, the game, after the bye, against Cincinnati, at Cincinnati. The Browns I'm going to say this again, the Browns have a very, very good shot at beating Cincinnati. Simply because, look what the Saints did to Cincinnati yesterday. They embarrassed them 51-14. Who would have thought the Saints could do that to the Cincinnati Bengals? But hey, the Browns got to win no matter what. The Browns got a victory. And they are now 3-6-1 on the year and 3-2-1 at home. They have a winning record at home. How nice is that? To me personally, it's unbelievable. You look at how, I'm going to go back to this. You look at how good the Browns were, in the first quarter and, first half. Baker Mayfield, I'm going to say this again, went 12 for 12 with 2 touchdowns in the first half. How crazy is that? Baker Mayfield was perfect in the first half. That's I'm going to say that again. That's unbelievable. You look at where the Browns were when who did they face last week? I think they were, wait a minute. They faced the Chiefs last week at home and they lost 37-21. They lost to a good team. Kansas City is a very good football team. But then to come off of that loss and beat the Falcons, who would have thought the Cleveland Browns could beat a playoff contender like the Atlanta Falcons? You can't stop thinking wait a minute, the Browns beat the Atlanta Falcons? The Falcons were in the Super Bowl, I think 2 years ago against the Patriots and lost. And the Browns just beat a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. The Cleveland Browns beat that team. Now, I'd love to see them against the Philadelphia Eagles, which that'd probably be a little bit of an embarrassment for the Cleveland Browns. But, I personally, I could see the Browns hanging with Philadelphia, for sure. If you put the Browns against the Eagles, either in Philly or in Cleveland, either one, the Browns have a legitimate shot of beating them. But I know everybody's going to say, they're the defending Super Bowl champs and they've got Carson Wentz and this and that. You know what? One guy doesn't make a team. Look what the Browns did. Their running game was flawless. Their passing game was flawless. Their defense was flawless. Their special teams was flawless. That is winning. That is winning football as a team right there. If one of those things isn't working, then there's that chance you may lose the game. But if all 4 facets of the game are perfect for a team, they've got a great shot at winning games. And it showed yesterday for the Cleveland Browns, winning 28-16 over the Atlanta Falcons. And you also look at coming off that loss to Kansas City, 37-21, and then I want to say this again, beating the Falcons 28-16. I mean, that was a very quick turnaround, if you ask me, for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, coming off of a loss and then just blowing away the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, I don't think it was a blowout, but I think to me that was somewhat of a blowout, 28-16. I mean, that wasn't a close game. I mean, Atlanta had their chances of tying the game up. I mean, they went for 2 after a touchdown, and they didn't get the 2-point conversion. So, I mean, you look at some of the games that the Browns have played. The tie against Pittsburgh in Week 1, losing to New Orleans 21-18, beating the Jets 21-17, losing to the Raiders 45-42. Beating the Ravens 12-9, losing to the Chargers 38-14, losing to Tampa Bay 26-23, losing to Pittsburgh 33-18, losing to Kansas City 37-21, and then coming off of that loss, beating Atlanta 28-16. I know some people might not say the Browns are a dangerous team, if they can get into the wild card, but if the Browns could play the way they played yesterday, look out. Those other 31 teams, look out. Because this Cleveland Browns team is for real. And they showed it yesterday, winning 28-16 over a playoff contender and a Super Bowl contender in the Atlanta Falcons. And also, a little history for you guys. Nick Chubb had the longest rushing touchdown in Cleveland Browns history. It was a 92-yard touchdown run. I mean, you're making history. Baker Mayfield was flawless in the first half. He threw 3 touchdown passes overall. I mean, and they had a touchdown in the first quarter. They actually scored a touchdown in the first quarter. I mean, you can't ask for anything better than that. Now, if Baker was perfection throughout the game, okay, I mean, that would be even better. But to go 17, I mean, to be honest with you, that's Patrick Mahomes' numbers. 17 of 20, for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's Patrick Mahomes' numbers. That's Mitch Trubisky numbers. I mean, Baker Mayfield is putting numbers up like Patrick Mahomes, like Mitch Trubisky. Like some of these guys that who've been here for a year or so, who've been in the NFL for a year or so. Think about that. And Baker Mayfield is a rookie. And he's putting up numbers like veteran Mitch Trubisky from the Chicago Bears, like veteran quarterback Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs. Those are 2 great quarterbacks. Now, the next day would be putting up numbers like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. But I think that'll be coming up next year for sure. But then you also look at the coaching staff for the Browns. I mean, Greg Williams, in my opinion, I don't think the Browns should go after head coach. They should keep Greg Williams and hire him as the official head coach. Because if he's the interim next week or the following week against the Bengals and they win, you might as well hire him. Just give him the contract, have him sign the contract, and that's it. Because there's something in him that is, helping the Browns out, helping them get wins. I know he's a coach. I know he's not a player, but the coaches always help the team get wins. If they can motivate the guys to play better. I mean, whatever Greg Williams said to the Browns in the locker room before the game started, before they came out of the tunnel for the first for kickoff, man, he better say that again and again before every game. And whatever he said to the Browns at the end of the first half in the locker room to get ready for the second half, he better say that again and again because the Browns are a very, very good football team. I know the record doesn't show it, being 3-6-1. I know it doesn't show it, but if the Browns had this winning mentality from week 1 till now, I could see us winning I could see us being, 6-4, or or thereabout, or no, 8. I mean, I could see us being 7-2. That's. I mean, you see. I mean, if you think about that record versus 3-6-1, man, I think the Browns would love to be 7-2 right now. They only have 2 losses and 7 wins. I think the city of Cleveland would be partying through the bye week until the game against Cincinnati. But hey, 3-6-1, 3 wins. That's better than nothing. That's better than 0-16. That's better than 1-15. I mean, and personally, I think the Browns did a great job of firing Hugh Jackson and firing Todd Haley. I think that was the best decision the Browns could ever make. And then also another decision the Browns made that was fantastic was trading Josh Gordon. That was those 3 decisions. I think that helped the team, and that just changed the culture of the Cleveland Browns for sure. Because you had a nutcase like Josh Gordon. I mean, he was always getting into trouble. So I think that was a great decision on the Browns' part to trade him. And then also with the way the Browns were playing with Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley, to fire those 2 guys, great decision. Because look at this game. The Browns probably would have lost if Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were on the sideline for the Cleveland Browns. The Browns would have lost. Because I'm going to say this again. I said it a couple weeks ago. If you watch the games when Hugh Jackson coached the Browns, he didn't show that passion, that emotion when the Browns made a good play. But then you look at Todd Haley and Greg Williams, they were showing emotion. They showed that passion, that excitement. But then you look at Hugh Jackson, I'm going to go back to him. He wasn't showing that much emotion. He did a fist bump here and there, but he wasn't showing the emotion. He wasn't showing as much emotion as Greg Williams and Todd Haley. I mean, those guys were going crazy when the Browns made a good play, when they had a good drive. So I think to have Greg Williams be the interim, I'm going to say this again, if the Browns can win next week, or not next week, but the following week against Cincinnati, the Browns might as well just hire Greg Williams as the full-time head coach. Because if John Dorsey is going to go out and look for a new head coach, he's looking at one right now, and that's Greg Williams. I know it's only one game and this and that, but still, to beat a playoff contender in the Atlanta Falcons 28-16, coming off of a loss to one of the best teams in the AFC, in the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that shows a lot about the Cleveland Browns, that they can bounce back after a loss to a playoff contender. I mean, I don't think anybody was surprised that the Browns lost to the Chiefs. But I think everybody was surprised that the Browns actually beat the Atlanta Falcons yesterday. I mean, I'm going to say this again. I was actually at the game, and to see the fans as we were coming out, to see all the fans just going crazy, and just everybody was just so happy. It was like we had won the Super Bowl. I mean, they showed people on the big screens just, sobbing a little bit. I mean, it was funny, but it was like, you know what, Cleveland has been through a lot, all these losses and wins here and there. I mean, it's crazy to see the Browns 3-6-1. I mean, I think everybody would love to see them 7-2, but I mean, what can you do? I mean, it'd be nice to see him 6-3. That would be even better, But I mean, if you think about it, this is the Cleveland Browns we're talking about. I mean, 3-6-1 is better than 0-16 or 1-15. So, I mean, and it all goes back to how good Baker Mayfield played, because you look at the past couple games that he's played, he hasn't played all that great. I mean, he's been sacked a few times in the past couple games, but yesterday he played like he played at Oklahoma. He just had that, that swagger, if you will, just throwing the ball on the run, and to be honest with you, he looked like the kid that we saw at Oklahoma. He looked like that guy, like that young guy he just played his heart out. I mean, he played so good. And I mean, people may say, well, it's only one game. Yeah, it's only one game, but it was one game against one of the best teams in the NFL, in the Atlanta Falcons. One of the best teams in the NFL. And Baker Mayfield was perfect in the first half and ended up going 17 of 20 for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, you look at the yards. I just thought about this just now looking at the yards. Look at what his yards. He went 17 of 20 for 216 yards. I don't know if any of you realize that, but that's a Cleveland area code, 216. How cool is that? Baker Mayfield threw a Cleveland area code, 216, 216. That's pretty cool in my opinion. I mean, this is the Cleveland Browns we're talking about, and the Browns quarterback just threw the numbers of a Cleveland area code. I mean, that's pretty cool. And then to add 3 touchdowns to that, I think Baker Mayfield, if he can play the way he played yesterday, I'm going to say this again, the Browns are going to be a dangerous team if they can get into the playoffs. They're going to be a dangerous team. Because if they can have that momentum all throughout the game like they did yesterday, look out, New England. I mean, look out, Philadelphia. I mean, look out, Dallas. I mean, there's all these teams that the Browns have not faced yet they could very easily beat. I mean, Dallas, Philly, there's that shot of beating them, definitely. I mean, New England, they've got a shot at beating New England. I mean, I could see it being a very close game, but I could see the Browns beating them. I mean, the list just goes on and on of teams the Browns haven't faced yet they could beat. I mean, they can beat Carolina. They could beat Houston. They could beat Denver. They could beat Baltimore. I mean, they showed that, what was it, week 5, they beat Baltimore 12-9. Very good game. I mean, the rest of the Browns' schedule from Cincinnati on, those games are very, very winnable. I could definitely see them beating Cincinnati on the road and at home very easily. I could very easily see the Browns beating the Bengals both in Cincinnati and at home. Definitely. I could see the Browns beating the Texans for sure in Houston. I could see the Browns beating Carolina. I could see the Browns beating Denver. And I can very easily see the Browns beating Baltimore at Baltimore. I know I may sound stupid by saying that, but it's true. Because the Browns have been in games before and they've lost them. Yesterday, they had the lead for most of the game. Or no, it was like late in the second quarter. Or late in the second quarter, the Falcons took the lead 10-7. But still, that was the only lead the Falcons had was 10-7 in the second quarter. That was it. The Browns had to lead the rest of the game. If the Browns can keep a lead like that for all 4 quarters and only give up a touchdown and only give up the lead once in the game early, I'm going to say this again. The Browns are going to be a very dangerous team come playoff time. And I'm going to say this again. Look out, New England. New England may have Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but they don't have Nick Chubb. They don't have Rashad Higgins. They don't have Jarvis Landry. They don't have Baker Mayfield. I know Tom Brady's better than Baker Mayfield, but truthfully, yesterday, it looked like he was the other way. It looked like Baker Mayfield was better. Baker Mayfield looked better than Tom Brady yesterday, for sure. I mean, he played a Tom Brady-esque game. I mean, going perfect in the first half, throwing 2 touchdowns in the first half. Nick Chubb had a rushing touchdown, then he threw a touchdown pass in the first half. Baker went 12 for 12. That's Tom Brady-esque numbers. And then 17 of 20 for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns overall. That's Tom Brady numbers right there. I mean, that's coming off of a loss. You go out and you're nearly perfect. Wow. That's the only word that's the only word that I can think of that can describe those stats. Wow. Coming off of a loss to a big AFC playoff contender in the Kansas City Chiefs, coming off of a loss like that, and then beating the Atlanta Falcons at home, 28-16. What a turnaround! I mean, who would have thought the Browns could do that? I mean, I'm gonna say this again. Looking at this game last week, looking at the schedule coming up, I was thinking, okay, Atlanta's gonna beat the Browns, 31-7, or it was gonna be something like that. But then I go to the game and I see, the Browns beat the Falcons 28-16. Where'd this perfection come from Baker Mayfield? Where did this come from? Where was this, from the Jets game on? Where was this? Were we missing something throughout these games? And the officials, I haven't seen a note yet, but there was one call that the officials made that the officials missed, that the Browns, there should have been a penalty. It was when Baker was going into the sliding motion and a Falcons player came in and hit him in the chest. But it wasn't like it was a vicious hit or anything, but it was still a late hit. And the officials didn't even throw a flag. And being at the game, the stadium actually was vibrating with screams and just people were just yelling. I mean, it was unbelievable. I was shocked the officials didn't throw a flag, considering the entire Cleveland Browns fan base was going berserk when that call wasn't made. So I think that's one thing the Browns only, as I said before, the Browns hardly had any penalties in the game. I'm going to say that again. That's a plus. That's an improvement. Only a couple penalties. Okay. None of the penalties cost us the game. We won the game. And here's something crazy for you. Baker Mayfield actually leads the team in passing yards with 1,984 passing yards and 13 touchdowns. And a QBR of 48.4. He leads the team with those numbers. That's crazy. As a rookie. He's already thrown for 1,984 passing, 1,984 yards. And he's a rookie. He's going to be breaking a lot of records, I can tell you that. He's already thrown 13 touchdowns in his career. And he's got an overall QBR of 48.4. The Browns might as well just get rid of Tyrod Taylor right now. Because Baker Mayfield is the franchise guy. He is the guy of the future, for sure. For sure. I know everybody's going to say, it's only one game. One game against one of the best teams in the NFL. And you beat them. That's a job well done right there. In my opinion, I hope the Browns get rid of Tyrod Taylor. Because Baker's going to be our quarterback for a long time. Because if he could put up numbers like he did yesterday, man, the Browns are going to be a playoff contender next year. I know I'm looking at next year, but still, the Browns are going to be dangerous this year and next year, for sure, and years to come. If they can keep playing the way they played yesterday, if they can look at that film and say, we need to play the way we played against the Falcons, I'm going to say this again. Look out, New England. Look out, Pittsburgh. You haven't seen the best of Baker Mayfield yet. Because this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of Baker Mayfield playing as well as he played yesterday. This is the best. This isn't even the best of Baker Mayfield. To be honest with you, I could see him going 19. Looking at the stats he had yesterday, I could see him going 19 of 20 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. I could see him doing that. For one reason and one reason only. The running game will be working, the passing game will be working, and the defense will be playing, and the offensive line will be blocking for him. They will protect him like he's the president, because that's what they did yesterday, in my opinion. The offensive line protected Baker Mayfield like he was the president of the United States. Not one Atlanta Falcons defensive lineman got to him. I don't think any Falcons players touched him unless he was on the run and running for a first down. That was it. But when he was in the pocket, No Falcons players got to him. Nobody. That's the way the offensive line should be playing. You protect Baker Mayfield like the Secret Service protects the president. That's what you do. That should be their mindset. Baker Mayfield is your president. So if the Browns can do that week in and week out, Baker Mayfield's going to be a legitimate MVP candidate come next year. I know this year it's not going to happen, but next year. I mean, if the Patriots don't get to the Super Bowl, the Tom Brady era in New England may end. And you know what? The Baker Mayfield era in Cleveland has already begun. This is our Tom. In my opinion, Baker Mayfield is our Tom Brady. He's our Aaron Rodgers. He's our Drew Brees. All those guys that are good, I get that. They're all, first ballot Hall of Famers. I get that. But Baker Mayfield there's a lot more to him to come. There's a lot more perfection for him there's a lot more perfection that he still has in his back pocket to come. There's a lot more winning to come if you've got Baker Mayfield as your starting quarterback. I know already when the Browns picked him number 1 in April, we're like, oh no, here we go again. This is gonna be another bust. I bet you all those people who were saying that then were like, I guess we were wrong about that. Because look at yesterday's game. Perfect in the first half with 2 touchdowns. And then overall 17 of 20 for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then Nick Chubb had a rushing touchdown, which was the longest in Browns history. It was a 92-yard rushing touchdown for Nick Chubb, which broke the record for the longest touchdown in Browns history, which was set by Bobby Mitchell on November 15th, 1959. His run was for 90 yards. 2 yards better. That's Nick Chubb is I know everybody thought, oh, he's not going to be good. We got Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. You put Nick Chubb behind Baker Mayfield, and you put Nick Chubb you put Nick Chubb behind Baker Mayfield in the eye, and you have Duke Johnson in the slot. Wow. And then you've also got Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry and Brashad Perryman. That's a playoff contender. That's a playoff contending team right there. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of upset this wasn't a playoff game. Because, man, that would have been nice. I know to be honest with you, it felt like a Super Bowl. AFC versus NFC. Simple as that. It didn't even feel like a regular season game. It felt like a Super Bowl. And the Browns, they won the game. And they finished the game. They didn't play 3 quarters and then, choke in the fourth quarter. They played the full 60 minutes. Which, to be honest with you, if they did that in every other game before this game, I could see the Browns being 7-2. Because in the other games, they didn't play the full 60 minutes. The Jets game they played very well in. The Ravens game they played very well in. Those are 2 of their 3 wins. But the other games where they lost by like a field goal or where they lost by a field goal or more, they didn't play the full, with the exception of the Chargers game and the Steelers game and the Chiefs game. The games against the Saints, Raiders, Buccaneers, if they would have played the full 60 minutes, they could have won those, 3 games. For sure. And to be honest with you, the 3 losses that they should have, which are to the Chargers, Steelers, and Chiefs, those are 3 good losses in my opinion. I know a loss isn't good, but those are 3 good losses against 3 good teams. The Chargers, Steelers, and Chiefs, those are 3 good teams. Granted, the Browns tied the Steelers week 1, but that was in Cleveland. That wasn't in Pittsburgh. And Baker hadn't played in Pittsburgh yet, and that was his first look at the Steelers at home. And you know what? He looked at it and he said, you know what, it's a game, it's one game, and we move on. I mean, I know everybody's probably saying right now, oh, Baker, he's our savior. He's the franchise guy. I'm going to say that right now. He is the future of the Cleveland Browns. He's our future. He's our future. And to be honest with you, when the NFL draft comes up again, I cannot see the Browns drafting another quarterback. Maybe something as a backup, but I can't see them drafting another good. I mean, you can see them drafting a good quarterback, but nothing to replace Baker Mayfield. Because in my opinion, there's no rookie quarterbacks in the NFL better than Baker Mayfield. Sam Darnold is second to Baker Mayfield. Josh Rosen third. Here. I'll give you guys my top 5 rookie quarterbacks that are starting. Baker number 1. Sam Darnold number 2. Josh Rosen number 3. Oh, here, I'll give you top 4. So I'll say this again. Baker Mayfield number 1. Sam Darnold number 2. Josh Rosen number 3. Josh Allen number 4. I mean, how nice is it to see that Baker Mayfield, here's another fact for you. Baker Mayfield his jersey is the top selling jersey in the NFL. How crazy is that? I mean, it's not Tom Brady's jersey. It's not Aaron Rodgers' jersey. It's not Matt Ryan's jersey. It's not Drew Brees' jersey. Baker Mayfield's jersey is the number 1 selling jersey in the NFL. To hear that and to say it, it feels really good because we actually have a great quarterback. I mean, you think about that and you say that and you're like, he's the number 1 selling jersey in front of Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. Cam Newton. The list just goes on and on. David Carr, Ben Roethlisberger. All those jerseys are behind him. He's at the top of the game. And I hope we see that for years to come with him, playing very good football like he did yesterday with his merchandise that he has, his jerseys, all that. Because to have a guy in Cleveland have the number 1 selling jersey, it must feel good for him and for Cleveland. And also, Cleveland's got a good football team. We are the birthplace of football. Football was invented here, just down in Canton, Ohio. Football was, as the saying goes, Cleveland is a football town. We are known for football. Not really because, the Browns haven't been all that great these past couple years. But before that, before the losing started happening, we were known for football. The Cavs were second. The Indians were up there. But the Browns were that's what people noticed us for, was football. But then when the Browns started losing and the Indians and Cavs were winning, those two teams became the centerpiece of Cleveland. The Cavs winning an NBA championship in 2016. The Indians getting to the World Series in 2016. Only to lose to the Cubs in Game 7. The Indians and the Cavs had their turns in the spotlight. I feel like it's the Browns' turn to have their time in the spotlight. And that spotlight is going to shine on the Browns for years to come. Starting this year or starting next year. This year is that rebuilding year. We're just 3-6-1 for the Cleveland Browns. They're 4th in the AFC North. I'm going to say this again. If the Browns can beat Cincinnati and basically just win the rest of their games from here on out, I could see the Browns in the wild card game. I could see them facing the Steelers in a wild card game for sure, because we're the only 2 teams in the AFC North that have a tie. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me check something here. I think we're the only 2 teams in the AFC that have a tie, I think. And in that case, I think the Browns and Steelers would play in the wild card game. Let's see here. Yeah, the Browns and Steelers are the only two teams in the AFC overall to have a tie. Wow, okay, that's pretty cool. And then the only two teams in the NFC to have a tie are the Packers and the Vikings. And the Vikings are 5-3, and the Packers are 4-4, or 4-4-1, and the Vikings are 5-3-1. So there's that shot that the Browns could be in the wild card game for sure. I mean, that's to see that and to think the Cleveland Browns may actually have a shot at making the playoffs. I mean, that's got to be something. Okay, so wait a minute. Oh no, that's last year. So the Browns, they're very good. They've got a legitimate shot at making the playoffs or making the wild card for sure. I mean, it's crazy to think the Browns actually have a shot at making the wild card. It's very surprising to me, only because we haven't been talking about the Browns making the playoffs in a long time. Since 1964 was the last time the Browns won a championship. They haven't won one since. And 1964 was called the NFL championship. It wasn't even a Super Bowl yet. Super Bowl wasn't even, there was no such thing as the Super Bowl until the early 2000s. I mean, how crazy is that to think the Browns won the last NFL championship before they called it the Super Bowl? Or, that was the Browns' last title, before the championship was called the Super Bowl. I mean, just to think about that and be like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any, that's unbelievable. So, we're gonna end the show. It's 9:56. We'll end the show, and I'm Ryan Kirby saying thank you for listening. We hope you join us at 5 o'clock for the evening edition of The Sports Show. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for listening, and go Browns!